Solo slooping is difficult. There isn't one piece of advice like just sail forehead that's going to make it easier, and even if there was, it's still going to be difficult. There are, however, 3 important skills that you probably do every single day that you can bring into solo slooping. These are resource management, multitasking, and critical thinking, which are all essential to making sure that every situation you get yourself into, you come out the best way you possibly can. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through 10 different things that I think are essential to running a sloop by yourself. I'm ToeJam. I've played the game since it was released, and I've done this live for about 1300 hours. Most of that I've done solo, and I never shy away from a fight. I don't run when I've got loot on my ship. In fact, I like to make sure I put my loot on the front of the ship to make sure people fight me, because I enjoy a good fight. I've had lots of people come into my chat and ask me, what's my tips and tricks to solo slooping? As I mentioned at the start of the video, there isn't just one tip or one trick you can give to people. You need to be able to make sure that people have got a certain set of abilities, like I mentioned, the critical thinking, the multitasking, and the resource management. Because when you're solo, they play a big part in absolutely everything you do. You can't ask your friend to help you. You can't ask your random crewmate in open crew, which are always really good, to help you. There was a Q&A on the forums not too long ago, and one of the developers mentioned that in the insider build, they've already put in sloops and bricks. So there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be playing the arena solo, not knowing what they're doing. It's not as easy as just raising the anchor, setting sail, and hoping. Everything you do has a big impact on how the fight is going to go. Hopefully by the end of this, you'll understand a bit more about how difficult it is to run a sloop. It can be a bit of a chore, but if you enjoy a challenge, then this is the thing for you. Let's start with something really basic. We're going to do the sword line. That's important for many different reasons, and I'm going to show you a few now. First of all, how do you sword lunge? Just press and hold your attack button. Easy. Now, but for doing that, it makes it a lot harder to get any mobility out of that. If you want to get some more mobility out of it, if you block first, then attack, it will allow you to do a jump when the sword makes a almost unsheathing noise. And you can see, you can get a lot more mobility. The sword lunge has one more important basic thing that you need to know, and that's sword surfing, which actually wasn't meant to be in the game. It was a unintended side feature that they decided to keep in because the majority of the player base wanted to keep it in during the betas and the closed alphas, I believe. And to sword lunge, all you do, block, and into the water, and you'll see that you keep your momentum. Even though the sword lunge seems basic, don't underestimate just how advanced it can be and how valuable it's going to be to you as a solo slooper. If you've got nothing better to do when you're sailing around, practice your sword lunges. Timing that jump at the end of the sword lunge will be invaluable to you in the future. Every weapon in Sea of Thieves has its place, but we're going to talk about all of the weapons and which weapon I recommend you use as a solo slooper and something that I feel like you should get good at using. So the weapons we've got the cutlass, which does 20% damage per slash or 50% on a lunge. The pistol, which does 50% per shot. The blunderbuss, which does up to 100%. And the eye reach, which does 70%. Now it's important to note that right now, there is a hit registry issue within the game, which means even though you get a hit marker, you haven't necessarily done damage to the client. Right now, I recommend you use the blunderbuss. Every weapon has 5 shots. Now the reason why I would say carry the blunderbuss at all times is because sometimes you don't realise when somebody has boarded your ship, and it's too late by that point to go and get the most effective weapon to deal with players on your ship. Look, everything on your ship is so close quarters, especially down here, and especially when they board up on the ladders. The longest possible point is obviously from here to here, but what you want to do is you want to bring the fight into your advantage zone. So you want to close that gap as quickly as you can. The one downside to running the blunderbuss as your primary weapon the majority of the time is that you cannot snipe barrels as effectively in the water. So if somebody tries to keg your ship, you are at a disadvantage. If somebody does board your ship with a keg, just work out where they're putting it and run as far away as you can without getting yourself 1, knocked off the ship, and 2, killed. Because if they get that keg off and kill you, your ship is going down. With the other weapons, the pistol has a quicker reload time and a better hipfire. The IR reach has better range, but personally, while I've been solo slooping, I found that the blunderbuss is just a better all-round weapon for me. I have hit kegs in the water, and I find I get more kills with the blunderbuss than any other weapon. Number 3 is really easy to explain, but hard to master. What you need to do, you need to learn everything about the moving parts on your ship. How long it takes to do everything. Moving the cannons, moving the wheel, moving the sails, dropping and raising the anchor, even how long it takes to aim the harpoons. But you need to commit these to muscle memory. The best advice I can give is that everything has an audio cue. If you lock the wheel left or right, it makes a clunk sound. Same with the sails. The anchor makes a noise when they drop and when it lands. Rather than having to visibly watch them, you can have your attention on other things. So if you're turning the wheel, for example, to the right, but you're keeping your eye on the left, you know that that is now a full lock. But you're not going to turn instantly. You've got plenty of time to do other things, like you could raise the sail to give yourself a tighter turn. This is where multitasking comes into it and where critical thinking is important. You need to make these decisions to be able to get yourself around quicker. Number 5, yep, different top, was recording last night, carrying on today. Number 5, about resource management and how many resources you have and how to find resources the most efficient way. When you log in, by all means grab supplies from the island, but get on your ship, raise your anchor, set your point to sail to. What you want to be looking for is these seagulls here. This indicates that there are some barrels floating in the water. If the density of the seagulls is really high, then it's a shipwreck. And sometimes you can see the shipwreck poking out of the water. You want to stop yourself as close to the barrels as you possibly can. Harpoon a barrel up, dunk it in the water so that you can reach it from the water, jump in and grab your supplies. I personally, every time I jump into the water, as soon as I get 10 cannonballs in my inventory, I know that was 8, I offload them into the barrel and then I go back again. To me, the most valuable resource is cannonballs. It's important to get moving again straight away, because while you're in the water, you haven't got very good vision around you, which allows you to be snuck up on by other ships, and your time is important. Now you'll notice that I didn't harpoon every single barrel, unload it into my permanent supplies, and then drop the barrel, grab another barrel. This is because this is more time consuming, and the time you spend doing that is time you could spend sailing. Now, my destination could be those rocks over there. I can unload this entire barrel before I reach that destination. And that's what's most important, is using your time as wisely as possible. By all means, you could cannon over to the island, but by far the quickest way to resupply is those floating barrels. I hate Steven. Steven does this. When you're heading to your destination, you want to detour to these floating barrels several times until you reach these stock levels. That's 100 cannonballs, 40 planks, and 40 different pieces of food. This is what I recommend for every single fight that you take with another player. With skeleton ships, you definitely need more planks, and you definitely need more cannonballs. But when it comes to PvP, I found that having 100 cannonballs gives you more than enough to be able to put a lot of pressure on the enemy. Once you've got 100 cannonballs, 40 planks and 40 pieces of food, you can then start slowing down on picking up supplies, because eventually over your play session you'll amass quite a few supplies. When you get around 200 cannonballs, by then your planks and food will probably be significantly more as well. You really don't need to bother anymore. You can, if you want, carry on getting more supplies, but you got to remember that you may sink and you don't want to waste your whole time just gathering supplies. But number 5, we're going to talk a little bit of theory, because the way your ship looks is very important on how well you can get your solo sloop mission done. Now I usually go around with a sloop that looks very similar to this. Sometimes I'll change the capstan to the Pirate Legend one, just in case somebody gets on my ship and I want them to think, uh-oh, I've made a mistake. But generally, if your ship is looking like this, with the default cannons, wheel, capstan, sails, you look like a noob sloop. And that tends to invite people to come over to your ship and try and take what you've got, or try and sink you. And when I'm playing, that's what I want, because I enjoy the PvP the most in this game. You, however, may not want that experience, so I would recommend that you dress your ship up. Don't use the Pirate Legend colours though. I've had mixed results with that, and I don't know why. Part of me thinks it's because people think, Pirate Legends, that'll be a challenge, that'll be something to tell my friends. And from my experience, people with Pirate Legend colours on, they're not always the best players. And I feel like that they're trying to do it just to peacock. They actually scare you away because they're all bark and no bite. Number 6 is what I like to call ship sense, which ties in with game sense. Pretty much everything you do in the game has a sound. And there are some important ones when it comes to people trying to board your ship. Now this is people coming out of the water onto the ladder, swimming around your ship, drawing weapons, reloading, and eating. Those are the important ones. And the ones that aren't near your ship, which are important as well, is cannon fire. If you can hear the cannon, most of the time they're within range to cannon close enough to your ship to be able to get on. So you want to couple this cannon fire sound with a visual. If you hear a cannon and you see the cannon that fires, but you don't see a cannonball, the player is fired out. It's a lot harder, especially at distances due to rendering, to see a player fire out from a cannon. If you hear this, be more vigilant with your ladders. One additional one here is that a lot of people forget this. When you draw your weapon, and then you try and do an emote, when you stand back up again, it automatically draws your weapon. Being paranoid has saved my ship many, many times. Alright, so I've changed my shirt again, and we're back. We're going to talk about ship mobility. It's important to be able to move your ship where you want it to go every single time. Now there's 3 ways to move your ship, or to turn your ship. First one is using the sails, which the higher up the sail, the tighter the turn. Or you can use the harpoon, which is great when you're around rocks like this. Harpoon turning allows you to keep moving, but maneuver. And that's really important, especially in a difficult fight with another player. The last thing you've got is the anchor turn. It's important to know that you use your time really well in this. You can drop your anchor, turn your wheel to full lock from the center, and then by the time you've full locked your wheel, you can get back on the anchor and start raising. You don't need to wait for the ship to come to a complete stop before you start raising the anchor again. As soon as it hits the bottom of the sea, you can start raising again to maximize your efficiency when it comes to turning with the anchor. It's really important that you practice harpoon turns, anchor turns, and raising your sail to give yourself the tighter turns, because you need to be able to get your ship's cannons onto the other ship before they get theirs onto you. Don't you just love it when you delete the wrong file and you have to re-record a segment and then place it in the middle of the video and confuse everyone? Me too. We're going to talk about damage control. There isn't a master list of what you should repair in a specific order every single time there is a problem with your ship. What I will tell you is, if your anchor is down, getting your anchor back up is top priority. Now that doesn't mean you need to just send it and get that anchor up, even at the risk of your ship going down. You need to consider the water level below deck. If the water level is going above the stairs and you can't bucket enough to keep that water level below the stairs while you raise your anchor, you need to do some quick below deck repairs to get yourself into the situation where you can raise the anchor before the water level raises into the top deck of your sloop. Once your anchor is back up again and you're moving, you can then continue to make the repairs that you need to make. There's one exception to this. If your mast is down, you still need to focus on getting your anchor up, as the chances are the reason your anchor was down was because either you dropped it, you got hit by a cursed cannonball, or a player dropped it. These are all situations that have a much lower chance of happening again. Until Sea of Thieves developers add it back in that you can drop an anchor by hitting it with a cannonball, you're pretty safe. So getting that anchor back up and then focusing on the fight again is more important. When you do raise the mast, you need to just patch it with one plank. If you don't patch it with one plank, when you drop the sails, the mast will fall again. The key here is to do as little as you can to get yourself moving again, because you want to be a moving target. You don't want to be stationary. It makes it a lot easier for people to board your ship, and it makes you a lot easier to be hit, especially if a ship pulls up next to you while you're in a vulnerable position, anchors, and then just starts laying into you. When it comes to hull repairs, you need to make sure you do the bottom deck first and prioritize the bigger hulls as they have a higher fill rate. As mentioned, and I can't stress this enough, it's important to keep your water level below the stairs as a guide point to knowing when you need to bucket and when you need to repair. The last thing here on the list is the ship's wheel. If the ship's wheel is damaged, you're going to find it a lot harder to make a turn. This isn't as important unless you're on a collision course with something. Otherwise, this can be left till last. I just got lazy bearded, so we're in a different place now. But we're going to talk about the cannons. Cannons are your best defense. First thing you want to do is you want to position your cannon, and you should always position them forward when you don't know where the threat is coming from. In my experience, that's where the threat comes from, is from the front. What we're going to do is we're going to use that turret over there in the distance as a mock ship. We know that this ship wants to fight, so we want to get our cannons on them first. Now, if I leave it like this, it's going to take me forever to get my cannon onto them. What you want to do, a little tiny little turn, that'll start turning your ship sooner, and you'll be able to get your cannons on them before they get theirs on you. Because generally, what happens is, ships will just come straight at you, and they won't do that little subtle turn. And that subtle turn can make a big difference in getting the first cannon shot off. Generally, you can get a couple of shots off before they do. This is where critical thinking comes into play. Thinking about planning ahead on your next pass on whatever your target is, I know that I'm going to need to have my cannons forward again. Now there's something else you need to consider, and it's that these waves will make this cannon aim up and aim down, and significantly change the arc of your cannonball. You need to adjust for that. You need to get yourself out of the mindset that missing a shot is bad. Use any shots that you miss as sighting shots to allow you to then adjust and land other shots. This is why it's important to have a lot of cannonballs, because you can put a lot of pressure on and you don't have to do as much guesswork when you can physically see where your cannon shot is going. Eventually, if you use the cannons enough, it'll become muscle memory and you'll just click to it. I say this to a lot of new players and to a lot of old players. Anything you see on the way, shoot at it. Give yourself a challenge. Say that you want to hit the top of that spire and then just try and hit it. And if you don't get anywhere close, just adjust and see how close you can get to hitting the top of that spire. It's all practice at the end of the day, especially if you've got excess cannonball. That target is a lot further away than it looks. What seems to separate the winning team is distance. You can get a feel for a ship by watching the way they cannon, but a lot of their shots are dropping short. Stay outside of that range. A lot of ships are very bad at readjusting their aim. Use the distance to your advantage. Number 10. I want to talk about ship versus ship metas and fighting other players. I'm also going to try and talk about all the other points that we've covered already to get you to this point. When you're solo slooping, the biggest threat on the seas is other players. Everything else is very predictable. When you fight other players, every encounter is different. So when it comes to ship versus ship metas, it actually comes down to other players trying to board you, because that is just the most effective way to sink another ship, especially in a bigger crew. Personally, I use that as my last resort, because I want to stay on my ship for as long as possible, and I want to sink them with cannon fire. Which is why good resource management is important, And for me, having a lot more extra cannonballs makes that easier. In these types of fights, it comes down to what they call a war of attrition. So whoever has the most supplies and uses their supplies the most effectively will win. And that's it, guys. That is the 10 bits of advice that I wanted to talk to you guys about to help you become a better solo slooper. We're just going to quickly recap them. The things we went over were sword lunging, weapons, knowing your ship, resource management, how your ship looks to others and how others often try to appear to you, ship sense, so knowing how your ship sounds when there isn't danger around, ship damage control and what you should prioritize if it's damaged, ship mobility, using your cannons, and then lastly, a couple of common engagement tactics that you'll see out on the seas from other players. I know a lot of that probably seemed quite complicated, but trust me, those really are the basics, and there are a lot more basics that go along with solo slooping in Sea of Thieves. I really want to go into more depth in a bunch of different topics, which I'm definitely going to do. If you've got something that I missed, or something you want me to expand on, drop me a comment with it down below, and I'll check them, and I'll pin the one that I'm going to do next. Just remember, if in doubt when it comes to something new, just try to think of the 3 main things I talked about at the start of the video. Your resource and time management, multitasking, so adding it into the routine of what you're already doing, and critically thinking, deciding whether or not it's more important or less important than something else that needs to be tended to on your ship. If you employ those 3 key abilities, you won't go far wrong when you're solo slooping. I've been Tojam, and I've been your temporary ship's captain. Hopefully I'll see you out on the seas. Whoa! Ballsy move. There's a kill. That'll be all of them then. A strike, boys!